Tomorrow, it will be 1 week since leaving my job to be a full-time self-employed musician. Now, that being said, I'm super stoked so far. I've loved every minute of this, plus things are actually going all right so far. I've already got 8 students signed up for my program. I've got a whole bunch of new gigs and new venues in the books. So far, no complaints. Now, on the other side of that, I've also had a lot of people asking me for advice already, which I don't really know how to feel about because I don't think I've earned that yet. I don't think doing it for 1 week warrants being a guru and being able to give advice. But basically, the questions that have been asked are mostly by my friends and family. Hey, I want to do that too. What should I do to get started? Now again, I'm not an authority on how to be a professional musician full-time yet. I'm not. But one thing I do have some experience with and I do know how to talk about is how to be smart with your money, basically. So that's a big part of being a professional full-time musician is being financially responsible. So basically, here's what I did to prepare. Main thing was, I made sure I had money in the bank. At the end of the day, nothing else will matter more than if shit hits the fan and things start going badly for you, that you're not gonna starve, that you're not gonna get evicted. You know, you need to make sure you have money in the bank for X amount of time. I think 6 months is a good amount of time to count on for having money in the bank for. You should have enough money saved up that if things get really bad and you're not making a dime, you can get by for 6 months on your own. That's what I would say. The second thing is prioritizing, right? So, what are the things that are most important financially to spend your money on, right? First thing should be the necessities, right? That should be making sure you can eat, making sure you have a place to stay, and making sure you have, I would call transportation a necessity, right? So those 3 things should be your number one. Make sure you can pay your bills, make sure you aren't going hungry, and make sure you can get to where you need to be when you need to be there. Second on that list, then, I would say would be your simple luxuries, right? So things that are going to be important to you to live a normal life and function and better your career. So this to me includes things like being able to have internet access, your phone service and things like that, so you can communicate to people and communicate to venues, as a musician at least communicate to venues and students and whatnot to build your business and better your business. So third on that list should then naturally be things like what I would call your unnecessary luxuries, right? So for me, this is things like Netflix, this is Amazon Prime, this is a TV service, this is a nicer computer, whatever. You know, things that are nice to have and are luxuries, but you do not require them to survive. Now, those things I mentioned were examples for me. I don't need a gaming PC. I don't need the subscriptions to, like I said, Amazon Prime, YouTube Red, things like that. And when I was prioritizing, those were things that I cut. I sold off some stuff I realized I didn't need. I canceled almost all of my subscriptions because I am prioritizing. So the reason that's so important is that way when all those bills come in at the end of the month, you're not spending more money than you have to live a comfortable life, right? So for me, I can live without YouTube Red. For me, I can live without Amazon Prime. Those are things that I didn't need. I downgraded my internet because I didn't need it, right? So these were things I did to cut the fat to allow myself to live more affordably while doing the thing that I want to do, which in my case is play music. So you've got money in the bank, right? And you've got your shit straight. You got your priorities picked out, right? So where do you go from here? How do you go about spending the money that you have and that you are allowing yourself to spend, basically, right? So this is where shopping smart comes into play, right? On average, I would say the average person might go out once a week, right? I don't think that's unrealistic. How many pizzas do you think a person orders in a month on average? Whatever your answer is, it's probably more than that person needs, right? How often do you need to order a pizza, right? How often do you need to go out to a bar with your friends, right? So what it really comes down to is, kind of falls into prioritizing, but it all comes into how you use the money that you've prioritized. Okay, so now you've prioritized. You know what's important, and you know what isn't important to you now, right? So the next part of that is building yourself a budget. This sounds boring as hell, and it is, and I'm sorry, but it is crucial, especially in the beginning when you won't be making a lot of money right off the bat. So figure out what your average cost of living will be, roughly, right? Figure out how much your internet's going to cost you. Add your rent, add your normal utility costs, add everything that you have decided you need to spend. Add all of those numbers up and you'll come up with a total of what your monthly cost of living will be, right? Now that you've got that figured out, you know what you need and what you don't, and you know how much it's going to cost you, that brings you to the next step, which is shopping smart. Now this one is probably the hardest for people. So for me, it wasn't hard to cut out Amazon Prime because I realized I rarely ever used it. I was probably losing money on it anyways. I also realized I didn't need YouTube Red because I watched all 10 episodes of Cobra Kai and I was happy. So I realized, okay, I don't need that anymore. Those things were easy to cut out. Building a budget, boring as hell, but easy, right? The hard part is you've got your budget now. Now you have to figure out how you're going to spend your money to stay within that budget. That sucks because if you're like me, and I think most people are this way, how many times have you gone grocery shopping and you walk down the aisles and you see all these things you want, but you don't necessarily need, right? Now this is the part where you start to give up on some of that comfort, some of that luxury, right? So maybe you really like this, name brand frozen pizza or whatever, right? I don't know, DiGiorno or something, whatever. Now, you might like that, but you also realize that's an $8 frozen pizza, right? Well, maybe get $2 Jack's Pizza, right? So you're giving up a little bit. You are, but over all the months where you start shopping more smart and spending your money on things that are more responsible will in turn make you living your dream and being self-employed much more realistic. So for me, for example, I am a sucker for expensive foods. Steaks are my jam. I'm huge into spirits, so I've spent a physically repulsive amount of money on whiskey and cocktail fixins and stuff like that, and that's something I've cut back on. So that's where you're starting to give up some of those luxuries that you've gotten so accustomed to. But at the same time, you will get used to it. When I was 18, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and a big thing for me was that I was overweight when I enlisted, and I had to really cut back on what I ate. And I got really used to eating smaller portions. I got used to eating food I didn't necessarily like, and then I began enjoying it because it was just what I was used to. It's gonna be the same thing when you start shopping smart. I went grocery shopping today, and my normal grocery shopping bill, this might sound expensive, it might not, is normally about $120 when I go out and grocery shop. That's making no exceptions, buying everything I want to buy, right? Now, this last grocery shopping trip was $60, and I got equally as much food as I normally would. The difference is, rather than buying really expensive steaks, really expensive seafood, whatever, I would, cut back. For example, I bought a 25-pound bag of white rice because it was $18, and that in itself is enough food to get you by for weeks on end. I bought ramen, you buy mac and cheese, these are the things you get when you're on a budget. And over time, just like when I was in the Marine, enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps Delayed Entry Program, you'll get used to it. I already have, because I started eating like this about a month ago, or maybe even 2 months ago now, because I was preparing to do what I'm doing now, and I like it now. I'm used to it, and you learn to get creative with these things. You know, I'm not just boiling white rice and eating it. You know, you find ways to make it interesting, you know, and over time, you get used to it, and you get comfortable with it, and at the end of the day, with all these things I did, I was able to cut my cost of living almost in half. Cool. So that's your step-by-step. So you do what? Prioritize, you figure out what's important and what isn't. After you've prioritized, you can budget, because now you know what you need and what you don't need. Now that you've budgeted, you now have to shop in a way that allows you to appropriately stay within your budget. Now, all of this is also dependent on income, which for a lot of self-employed people is inconsistent and unpredictable. That's why it's important to, in my opinion, cut the fat as much as you can, especially in the beginning, because that way, no matter how much you make, you will have the lowest amount of loss at the end of that month. Ideally, you won't have any, and some people get lucky, some people don't. But that's all going to come down to hard work and hustling. But the way to be smart with your money is those 3 things. So, other cool news that I'm really stoked about is that for the first time in years, I am playing bass in a band. I'm not a permanent member, nor do I know if I really want to be a permanent member in a group right now, but the long and the short of it is that a couple buddies of mine who play in a band called Misstep Forward, they're a pop-punk group out of kind of my area, have asked me to play bass with them on an upcoming gig. They've got a super cool venue called the House Cafe in DeKalb, Illinois. And I haven't played bass live in a good long time. Bass was actually my first instrument, and pop-punk was kind of what founded music for me. So I'm stoked. I'm thrilled that I get to hop back on stage and play bass again. So that's going to be a good time. We have a rehearsal in a couple days, and I'm going to make sure to get a little bit of video of that for you guys to see as well. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And that's why we're practicing. Of the band is better than 0% of the band.
Nirvana's first album wasn't just punk; it was like ultra punk. Like
nobody has ever. I was just saying, nobody has ever cared less about how they sounded.
They actually fired a stagehand for tuning their guitars too well.